Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Murderball Breakdown. My name is Oisin and I'm joined as usual by Darragh. Thank you to everyone who tuned into our debut episode last week. So on today's show, we're going to look back at the 1-1 draw against Burnley, the Daniel James saga, and how some of Leeds' internationals got on. And as always, make sure to subscribe to the Murderball Breakdown on Spotify, subscribe to Breakdown Inc. on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So Darragh, I suppose we'll get into it. Wasn't the best performance really on last Sunday. I think we kind of expected a little bit more. Managed to get away with the point. It wasn't a complete disaster. But you've had maybe 4 or 5 days to kind of stew over that performance, that result. What are your thoughts on Leeds' 1-1 draw against Burnley from last week?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't good no matter what way you want to code it, but it wasn't a disaster, as you said. Maybe in the heat of the moment, I was a little bit panicking, being like, because obviously the start of the season with United, but like they're pretty poor, but then still managed to grab the draw. I thought Burnley were the better side throughout, but it wasn't a great game of football overall. Don't think the last minute COVID cases with Click and Firpo helped matters too much. Um, Leeds just in the midfield, we just couldn't get on the ball for it. And like I know they had 65% possession, or as you'd expect for a Bielsa side, but it wasn't really until kind of the last 15 minutes that they got a stranglehold of the game. It was all very uncomfortable, and I know we knew that it would be a tough task going to Burnley. I think our score predictions were relatively conservative last week, but it was just a very poor performance that you wouldn't expect from a lead side.
Yeah, I think you got it right there as well. The COVID cases, that was a kind of a bit of a blow. And Click, I think you mentioned it as well during the game that Click is kind of, it felt like they actually did miss Click quite a bit in that game in terms of his link up and just his work in midfield. Not that he started last season well, but I think he kind of faded away a little bit throughout the season, got a little bit tired. But he started this season really, really well. I looked like they kind of were missing him a little bit. Llorente came back as well. That was a positive, I suppose. But Chris Wood really did have a good game for Burnley, and he's one of those who kind of is consistently performing quite well there. I think he kind of gets himself between 12 and 15 goals a season. He looked like a handful. Conversely, we could look at Bamford. He looked confident, I felt. Like, I thought he played quite well, and he took his goal. I mean, it was a little bit of a sloppy enough goal. He took it well still. But was he probably man of the match for you in terms of a Leeds player anyway, at least?
Yeah, I would say so. More so by default than anything else. He was kind of out of the game for most of it through no real fault of his own, to be honest. Just like the ball wasn't getting up to him. So, kind of what you do want in these sort of situations is that he really only did have one or two kind of half chances, and he comes away with a goal. So that's kind of all you can ask from Bamford. But going back onto Click and Junior Firpo going out though as well, I think not having Stuart Dallas starting in midfield as well is also a kind of a big loss into how like you can disrupt their midfield. Like Burnley just sort of ran all over Leeds and were able to play around with it, and it was a bit all over the place because like you kind of had Rodrigo playing a 10, and then you just sort of had like Phillips not playing in his role. He was a little further up, and then he sort of looked a little bit lost where he was. Whereas when you kind of have Phillips playing in that role, and then like Stuart Dallas hassling around the place, you're never too long without the ball. Whereas it just seemed for large parts that Leeds just couldn't get themselves on the ball at all. So whether Click would have started or not, I think Dallas not being in that midfield is also a big thing for the Leeds side. But yeah, Chris Wood, Leeds legend, some would say. Was he? How many seasons was he with them? I know he was Championship's top scorer for one of the seasons. Um, but yeah, he was a handful. I mean, it was all you kind of expected from Burnley. They got their goal, a sloppy goal from a set piece, but like it was coming as well. Um, but like I just the thoughts of like what Chris Wood would be like in a Bielsa side just entertains me so much.
Yeah, Chris Wood has played. Chris Wood, oh, that's a nice record. 88 games for Leeds and scored 44 goals. So literally A goal every second game. So that's pretty good.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
I
good.
think, isn't it? Yeah, that's pretty decent. I think as we mentioned there, like Chris Wood, he was a handful. He took, I mean, the goal was sloppy enough to be fair from Leeds. Really, they just kind of failed to clear the corner really, and it just initially when I saw it, I thought it was a mistake from Elliot, but I don't think it was because Wood gets a touch really that kind of throws him off completely. But yeah, in a Bielsa side, that would be super interesting really because to be fair to Wood, he does work. He works hard. Like I know he's not. I mean, he doesn't have the pace that Bamford has, or he doesn't have that kind of. He might not be quite as I don't know how to describe it, like nonchalant, perhaps with his touch and things like that. He's definitely a lot more robust and perhaps explicit, maybe than Bamford would be. But he's effective and he gets goals, and his finishing is quite good, all
I
things
think the ball
considered.
would
So
stick to him better than it would
yeah, it
stick to
does.
Bamford.
It does stick. Yeah, it does stick. And like, I just don't think. I mean, on the counter attack, you're not
Yeah,
getting. I mean, you're not getting much out of Chris Wood really there, are you? But I suppose we look kind of a little bit at the stats really, and 12 shots. Both teams had 12 shots. Burnley had 3 on target. Leeds only had 2 on target. That's. I don't want to call it worrying per se, but it's not. That's not what you really expect from a Bielsa Leeds' Bielsa or Bielsa's lead, should I say? But I suppose all things considered, Turf Moor, Burnley, it's going to be a difficult game. So a little bit of a challenge. Let's touch a little bit, I suppose, on Rodrigo because he's kind of a challenging one. I mean, it looked like last season, actually, it was against Burnley where he scored those 2 great goals. He came off the
yeah.
bench in the 4-0 win. And it looked as though he was going to kick on. He scored again, I think, the next week, perhaps against, was it Spurs, maybe? And he finished the season really strongly. But this season, kind of been in and out. Obviously, I know he started the game, but he came off against Burnley. Didn't look that great. What do we do with him? Is it a case of
It's kind of
keep?
it's kind of weird. Like he's they. I think that inside Tor Barch and inside like with the Leeds directors, they're all sort of thinking that he's going to be that proverbial new signing this year and really kick on. Um, and it's just like, what is his best position? He's. I don't think he's as good of a playmaker to be that out and out tenor. We haven't seen it anyway, to the level that we obviously had with Pablo. For the now, I know it's hard to compare against Pablo, but like when you're signing someone for a club record fee, you should be able to at least emulate what someone like 36-year-old Pablo Hernandez could do. Um, there were definitely glimpses. Like there were times where like there was some lovely interplay between him and Rafinha, and you could just sort of see the quality. There was a point where you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember who the Burnley player was, but the ball sort of comes to Rodrigo and he just dummies it, as in lets the ball run by him and then runs by the defender, and you're just like, oh, quality. And like out of nothing, he created something that just no one could have seen coming. But then it's just like, wow, so many times it's just like the game passes him by, he gets subbed off early, and you're like, we paid 30 million pounds or euro for this fella, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of him. He scored a couple of goals, had a few glimpses, and you're like, right, let's go. But then there's no real other option in 10, is there? So they are probably a better team with him on the pitch, I suppose. But like it's just a little frustrating because you paid all the money and he hasn't really kicked on for you just yet.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. You really hit the nail on the head there. It's kind of a case he doesn't quite fit in. He's like a 9.5. You kind of want him to be that, like, but because he's not quite a 10, he probably is better suited to a 9. But you're not going to drop Bamford for him.
No.
So where do you kind of fit him in? It's probably maybe just a case of just giving him more time in that position, perhaps, and just letting him kind of work it out himself. Because it has been his career at Leeds. His time at Leeds has been kind of a little bit stop-starty, really. And
Yeah.
we are only 3 games into the season too, so I think it's one of those you probably have to give it time. But it'll be interesting to see, I suppose, how that develops over the next few weeks. But speaking of club record fees, someone who almost I think Rodrigo still was a little bit more expensive, but deadline day, Leeds finally brought in Daniel James. It was a long time coming. 2 years, January 2019, I think it was, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So my initial thoughts, I suppose, and initially I did think that the fee was a lot, 25 million, quite a lot. I did read, I think it was Phil, I think had a piece that kind of mentioned how Leeds' board were kind of looking at deals involving players like Buendia to Villa from Norwich, Joe Willock to Newcastle from Arsenal, and they kind of looked at those deals and thought, well, okay, this the Daniel James one, they were like 22 million, 27 million, I think, for Buendia, 25. I looked at the Daniel James one and thought, okay, this is all things considered, when that's what the market is like, this is kind of decent enough value for money. So the more I think about it, the more I'm looking forward to seeing James in this team. But what are your thoughts? Do you think it's too much? What are your views on James fitting into this lead side? What do you think?
Yeah, I suppose, like, just because what you've seen from out of United, you are probably thinking he is a little bit too much, but we probably have a bit of a warped sense of reality of what you can buy players for. Like, we fairly landed on our feet for getting Rafinha for whatever it was, 17 million pounds. Even Jack Harrison, 11 million pounds. Like Llorente as well. So like that isn't how the market actually is, given that you're seeing like PSG casually reject 190 million pounds for Mbappe and all these wages. So like, and like they didn't really spend much. What did they do? 13 million on Firpo, 11 million on Harrison. Was there anyone else that I'm missing this summer?
Klassen came in, but I think he was maybe 1.5. I think could have
Yeah,
been
so
undisclosed. So
it
that was it.
wasn't. They probably had the money to spend. I mean, I don't know the Leeds finances exactly. So they probably did, and I think that was always the thoughts that if someone like there could be a late transfer for a winger if someone came up and they would budget it and they saw it. I think the key thing is that Bielsa loves Daniel James. I think you said to me off air that the thinking was that he'd convinced the board that if they had him in 2019 that they would have got promoted. It's just interesting to see what he's going to do, because like Leeds are obviously, we know the players have such like a high level of passing and intricate passing, and it's probably not something you associate with Daniel James. And it's like he's not going to come in exactly and be able to play that style straight away. Like, I could see him being a bit like Rafinha last year, where he'll spend a bit of time on the bench and he'll start the odd game ahead of Harrison and that. But like, there are times where you just kind of see when there's a bit of space where the ball is played forward to Harrison. He just doesn't quite have that pace where you're just like, Daniel James will be gone. He'll be gone and Bamford will be there. And that could be worth an extra 3-4 goals a season. Seems like a nice fella as well, in fairness to him.
That's crucial. He seems like a really nice guy. Yeah,
I'd say he
I
could
agree.
be kind of a, like, to play in this BL system, you have to be a real high character, like a blue chip sort of fella that'll like kind of die for the cause. Like, no questions asked. If he tells you to jump, you ask how high and that sort of thing. So I think there is obviously, like, there's a lot of talent there with him. If you talk to a lot of Man United fans, they'll obviously be frustrated with some of his decision making and calling him a bit headless at times. And like, there's obviously going to be a degree of how much can you coach that out of someone. But like, I don't think, we talk about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and like, he's obviously doing a pretty good job at Man United, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's hands-on to improve players. Like, seems like a manager that can kind of set up a team with good players. Like, their team costs £500 million. Like, you're not going to be taking in Paul Pogba and telling them this is how you improve as a player. You use the player you have. So I don't think, in terms of a developmental coach, he was the fella for Daniel James. Whereas I think that Bielsa, we've seen it over the last 3 seasons or however long he's been here. He could do something pretty special with him.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The United fans' reaction to James leaving, I think most were kind of like, it seemed like most were pretty sad to see him go. I think they understood, obviously, I mean, when you get Cristiano Ronaldo, like, you probably let anyone go, really. But they kind of, I think it was a case of they kind of understood that this fella is talented quite clearly. He gave his all for the cause. He put in some decent performances, but maybe he just wasn't quite ready, or maybe he just wasn't quite at the level that United fans had expected. But I think it'd be interesting to see how he does, really. I think on the counter attack, he's going to be really, really dangerous for sure. Because I mean, we know how strong Leeds are and how quick they can get themselves up the pitch. And James is going to be one of those who'll be right up there straight away. It's one of those, like, could you see him perhaps improving in a way that Sterling did maybe at City? I know, obviously, I think Sterling's a fantastic player, and I'm not saying he's at that level, but Sterling always seems to kind of, especially when he first got to City in the last couple of years, not so much, but It was a case of he always seemed to be in the right spot at the right time whenever a cross had come in. It felt like every single Man City goal was kind of pretty similar for a couple of seasons, where like they'd just get to the byline, cross it, and there'd be Sterling there to tap it in because he'd always just be in the right position. He's always had the pace to do that. Could you see James doing something like that? Perhaps. I think it's interesting when you say what position he's going to play, because it's tricky, because you're not gonna spend 25 million on him and not start him. I don't think. Now, I mean, Bielsa's done it with Rodrigo, so maybe he will. But it feels like Bielsa likes Daniel James so much that he will find a spot for him in this team. But where do you put him? Because I know we spoke a little bit off air, and you kind of mentioned that maybe you stick Rafinha into the 10, and you play James on the right or the left. You can play either. I think, well, the left more so, but you can play either. And you stick Harrison out the other wing, and you see how that goes. Is that something that could potentially materialize, or is it a case of you use him a bit like initially anyway, a bit like Wolves used Traore a couple of seasons ago, where you kind of make him an effective sub? Because I think Bielsa's looking at this too, where we looked at the Burnley team, and now again COVID took Klick and Firpo, who are both first team. Well, I mean, probably first team starters, Klick, but out of the team. And is Bielsa maybe looking at his bench there with 4 young players who have no Premier League experience and thinking, I need more depth here more so than anything. With Pavetta gone as well, obviously now Helder Costa's gone, but is he looking at thinking we need a little bit more depth? So for you, where do you think he fits in terms of the starting 11, and is it even a starting spot?
I would say that it's going to just be a straight up battle between him and Jack Harrison.
Yeah.
I think it could depend on the game as well. Like, as you said, if you're I could see him actually starting more against like top teams where, you know, you're going to be under a little bit of pressure. They're going to plan to dominate the ball, and like Daniel James could be there for your quick counter attacks. Whereas against your Burnleys, I know it didn't pan out like that, but you would normally expect Leeds to sort of dominate the ball and play around with it. Jack Harrison might be a little bit better suited. I think you could be right though again about coming off the bench, especially to start. I think it'll work out fine that he will start on the bench probably like up until Christmas, because like Rafinha was, I think his first start was against Arsenal last year, which was like October or something like that. Because even like the Burnley game the last day, sort of followed the same pattern. You know, sometimes where you see Leeds and they're under pressure, and you're just like, well, teams can't sustain this sort of pressure against Leeds for 90 minutes. So if they can hang on and not concede, they're going to score. And then from there, that's where you get your 3, 4, 5 nils, because teams have to chase them and they keep countering them and scoring. So when Leeds sort of got the goal at the 1-1, and Burnley still decided they wanted to score, there was plenty of counter. Well, not say plenty, a couple of chances towards the end where Leeds were countering, which, just to go back to the Burnley game, was a bit of like, okay, the system isn't completely gone here. But something like that would have been perfect for Daniel James to come on if he's fresh. He's going against a fullback that's played 75 minutes against a Leeds team, and then Daniel James is going to come on and just absolutely run at you. But then from there, if you can develop, you could see him starting ahead of Jack Harrison. It's a pretty good option, Sam. If he develops, and Jack Harrison, who I think will still keep developing, it's pretty good options to have. I'm not sure if he will do. I was only toying with the idea with Rafinha 10. Like, he did drift in there a good bit against Everton, but I'm not sure how much of an actual future he would have in there, because he offers just so much on that right wing.
Yeah, he's effective out there. We've seen it even for the Leeds goal where he skinned the fullback and played a cross, and then Shackleton hit it, Bamford went in. But I like that point about James against the bigger clubs, counter-attacking ball over the top against like a City or something like that. I'm looking at, I know obviously Leeds won that game in the end, but I'm looking at the 2-1 win against City. Leeds down to 10 men. Like, you're looking at a game like that, and you think that James would be great for that long ball over the top. And now, ball. Let's quickly touch on Helder Costa. Obviously, he left on loan to Valencia. I think he was pretty good. I mean, the season he was on loan was quite decent. Last season didn't quite live up to it, really. When you consider he cost, 15 million, I believe.
16 million.
Yeah. I think Wolves kind of had us a little bit in that one. What we'll before we move, we'll quickly touch on it. What was your views on Costa? I suppose it just kind of didn't really quite work out necessarily, did it? Really?
Yeah, I think sort of by last year there was always sort of suspicions. Like when he came in, he was pretty good and good enough for the championship, but he wasn't quite developing to the same level that other players were sort of doing under Bielsa. And I think Leeds fans sort of knew that. And then I think they were sort of, when he started just kind of dropping to the bench and that, there was a little bit of like, okay, well, his time here is probably limited if we can get him off the books. I don't think he'll leave with, like, there's no like bad blood or anything between Leeds fans. I think they'll have relatively fond memories of him. He probably played as well as he could play for Leeds, and just probably wasn't good enough to take them to the next level. Like he was a loyal servant for a couple of years and probably just didn't quite live up to the price tag. But also he had plenty of important goals in the promotion campaign. So like I think Leeds fans will hold him in relatively high regard for the couple of seasons he spent at the club. But like he didn't. It's funny. Remember when Barry Douglas went on loan to Blackburn? I think it first was, and like Victor Ortis penned like a big open
Yeah,
letter, and he's obviously seeing that he can't do that for absolutely everyone. I think it was just like Heldercross has gone to Valencia. Thanks very much. See you
yeah.
later. But
He
it's
probably
funny
played
that
a lot more than Douglas as well, which is funny enough. But sorry, go
yeah,
on.
like Douglas had one season of playing really, and that was it.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of big characters sort of gone from the dressing room now. So like he was a mainstay in the promotion campaign. Alioski was a mainstay. Kiko was a mainstay. Barati, I know he was kind of injured, but he was a big character in the club for years. And then obviously Pablo as well. So I'm wondering, is that taking a little bit of a dent just in the locker room itself? There's obviously going to be naturally a little bit of transition there. I don't think any Leeds fans are arguing that these guys should be gone off the books. They're not going to take them forward, but it might just take a little bit of time for them to sort of find their feet again, getting a couple of leaders and the younger lads sort of stepping up as well in the locker room.
yeah, that's a good point. To be fair, it'd be interesting to see now how the kind of the dynamic is. I suppose I think it'll probably be fine when you look at it. You still got guys like Phillips, you still got Cooper, Bamford. Probably he's becoming a big character, click things like that. So I think it'll be fine. Right, let's move on to who's back of the week. This is our second who's back of the week. Last week, Adam Forshaw was the honorary winner of the who's back of the week. So we'll start this week. We've got a couple of options. I think I'll let you start this time, Darragh. I think I'm going to start last week. So who've we got for our first contender for who's back of the week on what week are we in? The start of September.
Yeah, I am going to go with who's back of the week. Leeds fans panicking. Leeds fans
Yes.
are panicking again.
Did that ever really leave? That's just constant. It's kind of
That's
always
just
just
constant.
slightly there.
Well, so like the last sort of from last season after the draw against Chelsea, it was probably the most enjoyable stretch of being a Leeds fan, aside from like the 3 games where they were promoted and you could just sit back, relax, and enjoy. So I think it's just because we expected them to come in and have that same form, whereas they've been, by their own standards, pretty poor. 5-1 against United, 2-2 against Everton, and 1-1 against Burnley. Not a disaster, but it's still going to make Leeds fans panic, especially now you have Liverpool coming up and you're just like, oh, jeez, this could be 2 points after 4 games, which in fast forward a couple of months, hopefully it's actually not a thing. But if it keeps chipping away that they don't get a win, you're just like, please, 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 please don't be down that lower half. Now, they are just probably going to be better than a lot of teams and still probably finish top half. But I'm sure there's plenty of fans panicking. I do think, though, that getting the equaliser against Burnley was a big thing. If you had 1 point after 3 games going into Liverpool and then lose that, 1 point after 4, at least 2 games back to back undefeated, 3 if you include Crew, not the worst. But Leeds fans panicking.
Yes, hopefully this is the only time that rears its head this season. I'm going to go Patrick Bamford back among the goals more so. Good to see. I'm glad he got on the score sheet. It was a decent finish. I'm glad it came against Burnley as well, because he clearly has a problem with Burnley, and Sean Dyche and Burnley clearly somehow still have a problem with him. So I always like when he scored against them last season as well, and you can see from his celebration that kind of it clearly meant a lot to him to score. It was a bit of a scrappy goal, but listen, you have to be in there. You know that kind of way. It was a bit of a poacher's kind of reactive finish. It reminded me a little bit of the goal Harrison actually scored against Burnley last season, where I remember it was like a little back flick. I think someone took a shot
Oh
from the
yeah.
outside of the box, and Harrison kind
I
of flicked.
think
It's a little
Leeds
bit like
fans
that.
are nearly more impressed when Bamford scores a scrappy goal like that, because
Yeah,
a lot of us, me included, maybe have a perception that he isn't that kind of clinical goal scorer. So when he does sort of get the scrappy half a chance out of nothing, you're like, oh, good job, Pat, you know?
yeah. It's not like he's instinctive. Maybe he's not as instinctive as other strikers, perhaps. He didn't feature for England. We'll get into the international break a little bit after that, but yeah, I'm happy to see Bamford on the score sheet. Hopefully, he can kick on. Hopefully, he can have another good season. Maybe 15, 16 goals again. I mean, I don't think it's like outrageous to say that because he's going to be starting every season for Leeds. Or sorry, he's going to be starting every game for Leeds. Leeds create a lot of chances. I know they didn't do so against Burnley necessarily, but naturally they're going to create a lot of chances. He will get chances to score. So, good to see Patrick Bamford back among the goal scorers this week. So Darragh, you're second, and we're going to go four. So I think we're going to go four. So two
Yeah.
each. So
Yeah. So
you go next. You jump up next.
I'm going to be the eternal pessimist here as well and go from fans panicking to the Leeds slump,
Oh,
where we
oh
are
Lord.
a 5-1 loss to your big rivals, leaky in defence against Everton in a game that they should have won and they drew, and then a Burnley team that you would expect a big win from. Sorry, I just couldn't speak there for a second. A big win from, and they were outplayed and drew 1-1. And for all the promises we were made about how great this Leeds team would be this year, we are in a bit of a slump, and we have
Yeah,
Liverpool coming up, and who knows how it's going to finish for us. But the Leeds slump is alive and well. But normally, though, to reel back on our fans panicking, when Leeds do slump, they tend to kind of come out of it on the other side, like the promotion campaign. I can't remember exactly the stats, but after the Forest game that they lost, they hadn't won a few games, and then they went and won 5 on the trot before the COVID break. Last season around Christmas as well, they were pretty poor, and then kind of came back and obviously finished the season pretty well. So, but the lead slump is back. But crucially, though, it's back with only 1 loss and 2 draws, which is better than 2 or 3 losses, which might have happened a couple of seasons ago.
yeah. I think that's a good point, to be fair, because they always do jump out of that. It seems like they have one every season, and I mean that's natural. Like all clubs are going to have something like that. You know what I mean? No, like unless you go undefeated through it, you're not going to have like spells where you're winning every game or you're winning every second game. Unless you're like top 4, probably more top 2 or 3. But it's always good to see, that they can jump out of that slump. They've got track record of doing that over the last couple of seasons. So fingers crossed, maybe the slump's going to come early this season. This is it. Now move on to Liverpool, and hopefully, obviously we've got the international break still, or we're in the international break, so still a week or so before that game. But fingers crossed. And then after Liverpool, the fixtures get a little bit kinder too, in fairness. So hopefully the slump won't last that long, and that'll be the only week. I want this week to be the only week that the Leeds fans panicking and the Leeds slump feature in Who's Back of the Week. Fingers crossed. Okay, so my last one. I think this has to be a contender for the favourite. It's got to be. We have to say Daniel James. We have to include him. I mean, after his 2-year loan spell at Manchester United,
2-year loan spell.
Yeah, just needed to get a bit of game time under his belt. Agent James has returned from his mission at Old Trafford, and he's back. It's still so fun. It's still such a bizarre saga, I suppose. The Amazon documentary was brilliant for that. I think that was my favorite part of the whole thing. Like I wonder, because Phil Hayes said, I think a few people have said that they actually had like his announcement interview and everything like that was done. His first interview at the club was finished in 2019, but it just never saw the light of day. I wonder if there's someone who has that. Like, is it like a hidden tape of this Daniel James interview talking about how excited he is to play for Leeds, that just did they delete it, or did they just have it like somewhere?
A bit like the Roy Keane MUTV interview.
Exactly. Yeah. Is it just hidden and locked away somewhere? But no, I think it's great. I mean, I think he classes as being back. So I am looking forward.
He's very back.
Yeah, he's back. I'm looking forward to seeing James now. In fairness, he He didn't feature for Wales against Finland because I think of the transfer saga stuff. So not saga, sorry, just the transfer stuff. So be interested to see how he does if he features the next couple of games. But I'm looking forward to him. I think he'll probably feature in some capacity against Liverpool. But yeah, Daniel James is my last contender for who's back of the week. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Daniel James is definitely our winner. He boarded his flight from Manchester to Pakistan, and here he
Yes,
is.
he's back. I think he's extremely back. Yeah.
Oh, he
Okay.
is so back.
All right, let's do it.
Welcome
Daniel
home, Daniel.
James. Congratulations, Daniel James. You have joined teammate Adam Forshaw.
Your award is in the
As
post.
your award is in the post. Yeah, yeah. Or just when Adam Forshaw gets his, you can just share it. I don't know. Okay, let's move quickly
The
on.
awards are all just going in and around the Ellen Road vicinity, anyways.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, unless it's I mean, chances are every single player in that like 22-man squad is probably going to get one at some stage. So let's touch on the international break a little bit, I suppose, before we go. Don't get too much into it because he's only got one game's gone so far. Let's go into Kalvin Phillips a bit though. England Player of the Year. I'm not gonna lie, I really did enjoy the video of him getting the award off Declan Rice. I know, obviously, this is not an Ireland podcast, but we don't like Declan Rice all that much here. But that was a cool. I don't know if you've seen that video. It was very wholesome.
It was very wholesome, and Kalvin Phillips, you just want to like give him a little hug or something sometimes.
Great guy.
He's there and he's just genuinely doesn't expect it, and then like Declan Rice, I don't want to compliment him too much, but he was being Calvin's hype man, and I was like, oh, this is sort of what I need right now for my boy Calv, you know. And it was like 40,000 votes, 40,000 votes, Cal. You know, he's like, and you're like, oh, let's go, Kalvin Phillips. It's like it's not just Leeds fans convincing ourselves you're good. People actually think that you are good. Like,
although probably as he said, it probably was Leeds fans. Because Leeds fans on pulse. But in all seriousness, that does show what a player he has been, because he only made his debut, I think, at the start of this year for England, and now he's their player. And I mean, from what I've seen of England anyway, and that's most of the game, all the games in the Euros, and I think I might probably watch the odd friendly, the odd qualifier. He was brilliant. I mean, I think it's deserved. So I think that probably does go to show you just how good. I mean, just how much Bielsa has brought him on, and just how good he has become.
Like he was when he was there, he always had talent for Leeds, and it was just like, where does he fucking play? You know, it's like, does he go centre mid? Does he go 10? No one really knew. And then it was like, no, you're going CDM pretty much. And like, he has transformed himself into one of the best midfielders in that position. Like, if you go through all the teams in the Premier League, like with the exception of maybe N'Golo Kante at Chelsea, you're thinking in that position, surely Kalvin Phillips starts ahead of most people. Like, fair enough, you have a tie with the fact that Declan Rice is at West Ham. Like, they're probably both on a similar level, but you're like a United, like he's getting in ahead of like Fred and McTominay.
All day.
You see Man City, like they have like Fernandinho, who probably isn't going to be there too much longer. It's like definitely could start for Liverpool as well. Like, given that like he's getting a nod ahead of Jordan Henderson for England now, and Jordan Henderson is just getting a bit off. Like, he could start for any team pretty much in world football, I would say, and do a pretty good job. Like, he's just transformed himself, which is kind of worrying, because if Leeds don't kick on, you can't expect Kalvin Phillips to stay around forever. Like, if he's going and doing all these great things with England and rubbing shoulders with guys who are winning trophies left, right, and centre, but you also wouldn't begrudge him too much if he did ever. But hopefully, it never comes to that. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Like, he probably isn't going to be sticking around too long unless Leeds kick on. But no, it's great. And like Pirlo, actually, in an interview with The Athletic, he mentioned he actually name checked. Well, he didn't name check me, the boy at Leeds, which I think is that's a name check enough for me, really, saying that he's like the only regista, so that kind of Italian like sitting midfielder who kind of is in the mold of Pirlo. He kind of mentioned him as the only one in England. So high praise from someone like Pirlo. No appearance for Bamford, I suppose. I don't think that was I think that was probably a given. I think Andorra is probably the game for him. I mean, England are going to win that one in their sleep, so it'd be nice to see him perhaps get a start there. He'll feature at some stage, but Hopefully, because I mean, a goal against Andorra, a couple of goals against Andorra, maybe that'll have his confidence again, just getting higher and higher.
I don't think he struggles with confidence, though. To be honest, I think
True.
for Bamford to he comes to a club like Leeds where he probably gets a hard time in parts from fans anyway, and to survive all that over the last 3 seasons. I know there was no fans in the stadium for the last season and a half or whatever, but to survive that and flourish through that, you have to be mentally tough. Because the going gets tough in Ellen Road, and Bamford kind of does, and just even his journey in that. I know there's that sort of stat where he had what is it, 1 goal or no goals in 27 Premier League appearances. Now, bit of a stupid stat because he'd play 2 minutes here and there
Yeah.
as a late sub, but he sort of always had that. You could tell that inner belief in himself, and maybe no one else had, and obviously Bielsa has it as well. So I don't think that's too much of an issue, but it would just be nice for him to get his international cap. Would be just rewards for just all the hard work that he's put in over the last couple of years.
Definitely, I hope to see him appear. And then we had a couple of other guys. Cooper, obviously, he was back starting for Scotland. Stuart Dallas out at the Northern Ireland game. It was noted as personal reasons, so hopefully everything is okay there. Obviously that'd be a massive blow if he misses a couple of. Again, not bad. We don't know what the story is, and it doesn't really matter, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things. If it is something serious, but if he's out, it will be a serious blow for the Liverpool game, and as well, it's Rafinha, the Rafinha one as well. I mean, Rafinha called up to Brazil, obviously, but Brazil are on the red list, so there's talk. I was actually just reading this morning, so I think it's either a case of he goes and he comes back and he has to quarantine for 10 days. But I think if he doesn't go, he gets some kind of a 5-day ban or something like that. There's some strange thing with Rafinha, but it's disappointing because he absolutely deserves to be in that Brazilian squad, doesn't he? I mean, considering what he's done for Leeds since he's arrived.
Yeah, and I think I know obviously Brazil they're not the 2002 team with Ronaldo and Ronaldinho and etc. But you still kind of view Brazil in the same way that you'd kind of view New Zealand rugby, the All Blacks, something like that. Even if they're not winning World Cups, you're just they are the team,
Yeah.
So, and I think getting a call up in Brazil is such a big thing for now. I know obviously in every country it's such a big thing, but in Brazil especially, it's amplified if you get called up to the team. So for a guy who was again, Leeds got him in for barely
Pennies, really, yeah.
in real life is a lot of money, but in football in terms for not a whole lot. And he's, if you were to look at it as someone who doesn't really know much about football, you'd be like, oh, move to Leeds from Rennes, what's going to happen here? And who's this fella? And he's been electric. And I think we said last week, we're happy for him that he's getting to play in front of an Ellen Road crowd because he's just adored for everything that he gives. And it's great that he is getting his recognition to play for Brazil. It's such a huge honor for him. And I think the squad, they all had to jiggle around now, but wasn't the forward line. It was only him, Neymar, and Richarlison, which is some great company. Yeah, some great company to keep. So hopefully at some point he does get to go to Brazil and get an appearance for them. And the way that he is going, the way that he's playing, and obviously hopefully he'll stay at Leeds for a while yet. But you could see him, and given at his age, that he could be a mainstay in that Brazilian team again. He's the most Brazilian footballer ever.
Yeah.
And he has everything. And I think the thing that we're most impressed with probably is that his work rate is just so good for the cause. He just doesn't rest on the fact that he just has some silky skills and that. So a little bit sad for him that he doesn't get to go over and make his debut yet. But fair play to him getting called up anyway. And hopefully when this pandemic sort of slows down or we don't have to talk about it anymore, he'll be going over to Brazil soon.
Yeah, I'm just reading here actually. Mail Online have a piece. It's actually truly, or Leeds Live have a quote in Mail Online, but apparently so. FIFA's footballing legislation permits them to ban clubs from fielding players for 5 days after an international break if the club doesn't allow the player to be released for international duty. So it looks as though there could be a little bit of a fight between FIFA. I think FIFA are standing with Brazil because they want to call up Rafinha, but Leeds don't want to call up Rafinha. But if they don't do it, it looks like it could get a little bit messy because it's like lose-lose. Because if they don't call him up, apparently it's a they get a ban for 5 days. And that means he's missed the Liverpool game. But if they do call him up and he goes, he has to come back and then quarantine for 10 days, which all means he also missed the Liverpool game. So that's not looking too good, but hopefully that develops into something positive for Leeds, but it doesn't look great, really.
There's a few cases of that of Premier League players, though, so you'd be surprised if all
the
banned.
Richarlison, Alisson, they have a good few there. So that's probably one to look out for. But we'll see how that develops, I suppose, in the next week or so. We'll get more into the international break a little on next week's episode, because obviously there'll have been 2 more games in the meantime there, so we'll have plenty more to chat about. Obviously next week then we've got Liverpool as well, so we'll preview that game. That'll be a good one to kind of look back. We might look back at a couple of the fixtures from last season, because they were 2 great games, really. And it's probably set up to be another great one, I think, really. And it's a big game for Leeds though too. I mean, we don't want to touch on it too much, because obviously next week we'll get into it, but it's a big game for Leeds. They need wins, no question about that. Liverpool started in great form. So Darragh, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks to everyone for listening. Don't forget, once again, you can listen to the Murderball Breakdown on anywhere you Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can subscribe to Breakdown Inc. on YouTube to watch this in video form. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll chat to you next Friday.